Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more English story. Ethan sat at the edge of his bed, his eyes fixated on the empty, dusty corner where a framed photograph of him and Julia once stood. The picture had long since been taken down, but its absence seemed to mock him, reminding him of the life he once had. The apartment, once filled with shared dreams and plans, now felt cold, empty, and void of any warmth. His fingers lightly traced the fabric of the couch where he and Julia had spent countless evenings watching movies, laughing, and sharing hopes for their future. It had been 6 months since the breakup. Yet Ethan could still feel the sting of her words, the suddenness of it all. I need to focus on myself. Ethan, I'm not happy. Those words echoed in his mind every night, playing like a broken record. And no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't seem to turn the volume down. Julia had walked away from their relationship, leaving him with a hollow heart and an overwhelming sense of loneliness. As if that weren't enough, he had also lost his job, a position he had worked tirelessly to secure and one he had believed was his dream job. The weight of his failures hung around him like an invisible cloak, suffocating him in his own apartment. He didn't know how to move forward. The disappointment in himself had become a permanent fixture, a shadow that clung to him even when he tried to forget. What did he have left to hold on to? One Saturday morning, as Ethan aimlessly wandered the streets near his apartment, he decided to take a walk for some fresh air. The breeze was warm, and the sun was high, but it didn't matter. He still felt like he was trapped inside his own mind, a prisoner of his past mistakes and his inability to move on. As he walked down the familiar street, he noticed an elderly man sitting on the porch of a house he often passed. The old man, with his white beard and kind eyes, waved at him. Ethan hesitated for a moment before giving a small wave back. "Hey there, young man. You look like you've got a lot on your mind. Care to sit for a moment?" The elderly man called out. Ethan, somewhat reluctant but curious, walked up to the porch and sat down in the chair beside the old man. "I'm Mr. Henry." The elderly man introduced himself with a warm smile. "And you are?" "Ethan," he replied softly, still feeling like he didn't belong in the conversation. I didn't mean to bother you." "No bother at all, Mr. Henry said. It's a beautiful day, and sometimes it's nice to talk with someone, even a stranger." For a few moments, they sat in silence, with the occasional chirping of birds filling the air. Ethan wasn't sure what to say. He felt like his life was falling apart, and he didn't know how to share that with someone he'd just met. But Mr. Henry seemed to have an air of quiet wisdom about him, a calmness that made Ethan feel comfortable, almost like he didn't need to speak to be understood. Finally, Mr. Henry broke the silence. "You know, Ethan, I've lived a long life, and in all my years, I've learned that holding on to things that no longer serve us doesn't help anyone. You carry that burden, and it weighs you down. Ethan looked at him, puzzled. What do you mean by that? Holding on to things? Well, mister, Henry continued, sometimes we cling to old memories, past relationships, or even old jobs. We think they define us, but really, they only hold us back from moving forward. We have to learn how to let go. Ethan felt a pang of guilt at Mr. Henry's words. He had been holding on to his past for so long. Not only his breakup with Julia, but also his job, his sense of failure. He felt stuck, as though he couldn't move beyond the pain. But letting go feels impossible. He confessed. It's hard to just forget everything, especially when it hurts so much. Mister Henry smiled gently. I didn't say forget. Letting go isn't about erasing the past. It's about releasing the hold it has on you, so you can breathe again and make room for something better. Trust me, life has a way of surprising you when you let go of what's holding you back. Ethan thought about that. It was a simple idea, but it felt so foreign to him. How could he ever let go of the life he'd imagined with Julia? Or the job he had worked so hard for? How could he just release his pain and disappointment? You don't have to do it all at once, Mister Henry added, sensing Ethan's confusion. Start small. Take one step at a time. You'll be amazed at how much lighter you'll feel. Ethan nodded, unsure but willing to listen. How do I even begin? Well, that's a good question, Mister Henry said with a twinkle in his eye. Start by recognizing the things you're holding on to. Write them down. Feel the emotions attached to them. And then slowly, piece by piece, let them go. It could be as simple as saying, I'm ready to move on from this. Or it could be doing something symbolic to release it. Ethan sat back in his chair, absorbing Mr. Henry's words. It wasn't a magic solution, but it sounded like a start. A way out of the suffocating darkness he'd been living in. As the afternoon wore on, Ethan shared more of his struggles with Mr. Henry. He talked about Julia, his job, and how he felt like a failure. Mr. Henry listened attentively, offering the occasional word of advice, but mostly just being present. There was something comforting about having someone listen without judgment. Eventually, Ethan stood up to leave. Thank you, Mr. Henry, he said, grateful for the unexpected conversation. I'll think about what you said. Mr. Henry gave him a kind smile. You don't have to think about it for too long. Just take that first step. Ethan, that's all you need. As Ethan walked away from Mr. Henry's house, he felt a small flicker of hope that had been absent for so long. It wasn't a grand revelation or a sudden change, but it was something. The weight in his chest felt a little lighter, and for the first time in months, he considered that maybe, just maybe, he could start moving forward. The next day, Ethan decided to take Mr. Henry's advice. He pulled out a notebook and wrote down everything he was holding on to: the breakup, the job loss, the feelings of failure. He didn't expect to feel better right away, but just acknowledging the pain was a step in the right direction. That afternoon, he found himself at the park where he and Julia had spent countless afternoons. The bench where they had sat together, dreaming of the future, still stood under the same tree. It was here that Ethan had spent so many moments thinking he couldn't live without her. But today, he didn't feel the crushing weight of that loss. Instead, he felt a sense of release, as if he could finally breathe again. He stood up from the bench, walking away with a sense of clarity he hadn't felt in months. It wasn't that he had forgotten Julia or the love they shared, but he was no longer chained to the past. For the first time, Ethan felt the power of letting go. Part 2. Ethan woke up the next morning with an unusual sense of calm. For months, his mornings had been marked by a sinking heaviness. But today felt different. The act of revisiting the park and writing down his feelings had begun to create a crack in the wall he'd built around himself. It was small, but it was there. He picked up the notebook he'd started the day before and looked at the list of things he was holding on to. He reread the words, letting the emotions come back to him. Pain, regret, anger, they were all still there, but this time they felt like visitors instead of permanent residents. At the bottom of the page, he added a new line. What can I do today to move forward? The answer wasn't clear at first. Letting go. As Mr. Henry had said, wasn't about forgetting, but about making room for something new. Ethan wasn't sure what that something new would be, but he knew he had to start somewhere. Later that day, Ethan found himself knocking on Mr. Henry's door again. The old man greeted him with his usual warm smile. Well, if it isn't my young philosopher, Mr. Henry teased. How's the journey of letting go going? Ethan chuckled lightly. Slow, but I feel like I've taken a step. I went to the park yesterday, the one where I used to go with Julia. For the first time, it didn't feel like the end of the world. Mr. Henry nodded approvingly. That's progress. My boy. Every step counts, no matter how small. Ethan hesitated, then asked, but what do I do next? I wrote down everything I'm holding on to, but how do I let go of it all? Some of it feels too big to release. Mr. Henry's expression grew thoughtful. Letting go isn't about rushing or forcing yourself to move on. Sometimes, it's about creating new memories to balance out the old ones. When something feels too big to release, focus on what you can build instead. Build? Ethan echoed. Yes, Mr. Henry said. Build a life that excites you. A life that's worth living. Fill your days with things that make you feel alive. Over time, the weight of the past won't feel as heavy because your present will become brighter. Ethan let the words sink in. Build a life that excites you. It sounded simple, but he wasn't sure where to start. That evening, Ethan sat down with his notebook again. This time, instead of focusing on the past, he started writing about the future. Learn a new skill, reconnect with friends, find a job that aligns with my values. Try something I've always been scared to do. The list felt ambitious, but it also sparked a small flame of excitement. For so long, Ethan had been living in survival mode, just going through the motions. Now, for the first time, he was beginning to think about what he wanted out of life. The next day, he decided to tackle one item on his list: reconnecting with friends. Over the past few months, Ethan had isolated himself, retreating into his own world of pain. But now, he realized how much he missed the people who cared about him. He picked up his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found Sarah's number. She had been one of his closest friends during college, but they had drifted apart over the years. Taking a deep breath, he sent her a text. "Hey, Sarah. It's been a while. Would you like to grab coffee sometime? I'd love to catch up." To his surprise, Sarah replied almost immediately. "Ethan, I was just thinking about you the other day. Let's do it. How about tomorrow?" The next afternoon, Ethan sat across from Sarah at a cozy cafe. Seeing her again felt like a breath of fresh air. She was just as bubbly and kind as he remembered, and their conversation flowed easily. "You've been through a lot," Sarah said after Ethan opened up about his breakup and job loss. "But I'm glad you're taking steps to move forward. It's not easy, but it sounds like you're on the right track." "I hope so," Ethan said. "It's still hard, but I'm starting to feel like there's a way out of this." Sarah smiled. "There is. And if you ever need someone to remind you of that, I'm here." For the first time in months, Ethan felt genuinely supported. The weight he had been carrying felt a little lighter, and he left the cafe with a renewed sense of hope. Over the next few weeks, Ethan continued to work on his list. He signed up for a photography class, something he had always wanted to try but never made time for. At first, he felt self-conscious, fumbling with the camera and unsure of his abilities. But as he immersed himself in the process, he found joy in capturing moments of beauty: a sunrise, a laughing child, a bustling market. Photography became a form of therapy for him, a way to see the world through a new lens, literally and figuratively. It reminded him that there was still beauty in the world, even when life felt messy and uncertain. Ethan also started exploring new career opportunities. He realized that his previous job, while prestigious, had never truly aligned with his values. Now, he wanted to find work that felt meaningful, something that would allow him to contribute to something larger than himself. The journey wasn't without its challenges. There were days when Ethan still felt the ache of his past, when the memories of Julia or the sting of his job loss resurfaced. But he had learned to acknowledge those feelings without letting them consume him. One evening, Ethan visited Mr. Henry again. The two of them sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky with hues of orange and pink. You've come a long way, Ethan. Mr. Henry said, his eyes twinkling. I still have a long way to go, Ethan replied. But I feel like I'm finally moving forward. I've started building a life that feels worth living. That's all that matters, Mr. Henry said with a smile. Letting go isn't a destination, my boy. It's a journey. And from what I can see, you're on the right path. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan felt a sense of peace wash over him. He wasn't entirely healed, but he was healing. And for the first time, he truly believed that his best days were still ahead of him. Part 3. As the days turned into weeks, Ethan found himself embracing the changes in his life with a renewed sense of purpose. He still carried some of the weight of his past, but now it felt more like a part of his story rather than a burden holding him back. Photography, in particular, had become more than just a hobby. It gave him a way to express himself and see the world differently. Ethan found joy in capturing the small, often overlooked moments, dewdrops on leaves, the soft glow of streetlights at dusk, the way laughter lit up a stranger's face. His photos began to tell stories, and for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was creating something meaningful. One day, during a photography class, the instructor announced a project. Each student was to create a portfolio of 10 images that represented a personal journey. Ethan froze for a moment, unsure if he was ready to confront his own story through his art. But as he thought about it, he realized this was an opportunity, a way to face his past and share his growth. He started planning his portfolio, carefully choosing themes that mirrored his journey. Heartbreak, loss, resilience, hope, and renewal. Each photo would capture a piece of his transformation. One Saturday morning, Ethan visited a nearby park with his camera. He spotted a family playing with their dog and captured the moment, a child's infectious laughter as the dog leapt to catch a frisbee. Later, he focused on the gentle ripples of a pond, a metaphor for how even the smallest actions could create waves. While taking photos, Ethan ran into Sarah, who was out for a jog. Hey! She greeted him, her face lighting up. You look different, happier. Ethan smiled. I think I am. Life's not perfect, but I'm starting to feel like it's mine again. Sarah glanced at his camera. Working on your project? Yeah. It's been challenging, but in a good way. It's making me reflect on everything I've been through. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. You know, I think there's something powerful about sharing your story. It helps you heal, but it can also inspire others. Have you thought about sharing your photos publicly? The idea startled Ethan. I don't know. What if people don't connect with it? Ethan, Sarah said firmly, your story is yours. It doesn't have to resonate with everyone. but there's a chance it could help someone feel less alone. Isn't that worth it? Ethan considered her words. Maybe sharing his work could be another step in letting go, not just of his pain, but of his fear of judgment. A week later, Ethan decided to take the leap. He created an online portfolio and uploaded his photos, each one accompanied by a brief reflection on what it represented. He hesitated before hitting publish, but then he thought of Mr. Henry's words: build a life that excites you. With a deep breath, he clicked the button. At first, nothing happened, but within days, Ethan began receiving messages from strangers who had seen his work. Your photos are beautiful. They made me cry in a good way. I've been going through a tough time, and your story gives me hope. Thank you for sharing this. It reminded me to look for the little joys in life. Ethan was overwhelmed by the response. It wasn't about the number of views or likes. It was about the connections he was making. For the first time, he felt like his pain had a purpose, and that purpose was to help others heal. As Ethan continued to grow, he also deepened his relationship with Mr. Henry. The older man had become a mentor and a friend, always ready with a piece of wisdom or a comforting cup of tea. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch, Ethan shared the response to his portfolio. You were right, Mr. Henry, Ethan said. Sharing my story has been freeing. It's like I'm finally letting go of the fear of being vulnerable. Mr. Henry smiled warmly. That's the beauty of letting go, Ethan. It doesn't mean forgetting. It means making space for new beginnings. Ethan nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude for the man who had guided him through one of the darkest periods of his life. One evening, Ethan received an unexpected email. It was from a local art gallery that had stumbled upon his online portfolio. We were deeply moved by your work and would love to feature your photos in an upcoming exhibit on personal journeys. The email read. Ethan stared at the screen in disbelief. His work a reflection of his pain, growth, and resilience was going to be showcased for others to see. The night of the exhibit, Ethan stood in the gallery, surrounded by his photos. Each image told a story, and together, they painted a picture of transformation. As people walked through the exhibit, Ethan overheard snippets of conversations. This one feels so raw, like it's speaking directly to me. I can see my own struggles in this photo. It's amazing how he's turned pain into something beautiful. Ethan's heart swelled with pride and humility. He thought about how far he had come from feeling trapped by his past to standing here, sharing his journey with the world. After the exhibit, Ethan visited Mr. Henry to share the news. You've made me proud, Ethan, Mr. Henry said, his eyes shining with pride. But more importantly, I hope you're proud of yourself. I am, Ethan admitted, his voice steady. And I think I finally let go. Not completely, but enough to move forward. Mr. Henry smiled. That's all it takes, my boy. One step at a time. As Ethan walked home that night, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. Letting go hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. And now, he was ready for whatever came next. Part 4. Ethan's journey of transformation was far from over, but he had come to embrace each step as part of a larger process. The gallery exhibit had been a turning point, affirming that his pain and growth had a purpose beyond himself. He was beginning to rebuild not only his confidence, but also his relationships and outlook on life. Reconnecting with old friends. One day, Ethan received a message from a friend he hadn't spoken to in years. Mark, hey, Ethan, I saw your exhibit last week. I didn't get a chance to talk to you, but I wanted to say your work really moved me. I'd love to catch up if you're free. Ethan hesitated. He and Mark had drifted apart after his breakup and job loss. At the time, Ethan had isolated himself, unable to face the people who reminded him of who he used to be. But things were different now. Ethan replied, "Thanks, Mark. That means a lot. Let's grab coffee soon." A week later, they met at a small cafe. "You've changed, Ethan," Mark said, smiling. "In a good way. You seem lighter." Ethan nodded. "I think I've finally stopped carrying so much of the past around with me. It's been a process, but I'm learning to let go." As they talked, Ethan realized how much he had missed having meaningful connections. Reconnecting with Mark was a reminder that letting go wasn't just about the pain. It was also about rebuilding what mattered. A letter to his ex. One evening, Ethan sat down with his journal, a habit he had cultivated since meeting Mr. Henry. That night, he felt a tug to address something he had avoided for a long time: his unresolved feelings toward his ex, Claire. Their breakup had been messy and painful, leaving Ethan with lingering resentment and unanswered questions. But now, with a clearer perspective, he realized that holding on to those feelings wasn't helping him. He decided to write her a letter, not to send, but as a way to release his emotions. "Dear Claire, I've spent a lot of time feeling angry and hurt about how things ended between us. For a while, I blamed you for everything, but I've come to see that we both made mistakes. You were a part of my life during some important years, and for that, I'll always be grateful. I hope you found happiness, just as I'm learning to find mine. This isn't about forgetting, it's about letting go. I wish you all the best." As Ethan finished writing, he felt an unexpected sense of relief. It was as though he had finally closed a chapter that had been left open for too long. A surprise opportunity, just as Ethan was settling into his new rhythm. An unexpected opportunity arose. A well-known magazine had come across his online portfolio and reached out to offer him a freelance photography assignment. The assignment was to capture a series of portraits for an article on resilience, something Ethan deeply resonated with. Ethan accepted, feeling both excited and nervous. This would be his first professional photography gig, and he wanted to do justice to the theme. As he worked on the project, Ethan poured his heart into each portrait, striving to capture the strength and vulnerability of his subjects. The experience pushed him out of his comfort zone, but also reaffirmed his passion for storytelling through images. When the article was published, Ethan received messages from readers who were touched by the portraits. It was another reminder that his work had the power to make a difference. A visit to Mr. Henry. Ethan couldn't wait to share the news with Mr. Henry. That's incredible, Ethan. Mr. Henry said when Ethan told him about the magazine. You've found your calling, haven't you? I think I have, Ethan replied. And it feels good. But I couldn't have done it without your guidance. Mr. Henry shook his head. You had it in you all along, Ethan. I just helped you see it. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Sipping tea. Then Mr. Henry spoke, his tone serious. Ethan, there's something I've learned in my years. Life will always bring challenges. Letting go isn't a one-time thing, it's a practice. But as long as you keep your heart open, you'll find the strength to face whatever comes. Ethan nodded, knowing Mr. Henry was right. Letting go wasn't the end of his journey. It was a skill he would continue to use as life unfolded. A letter to himself. That night, Ethan decided to write another letter, this time to himself. Dear Ethan, you've come a long way. There was a time when you felt lost, broken, and unsure of who you were. But look at you now. You've learned to let go of the things that held you back: anger, regret, fear, and you've started building a life that feels true to who you are. It hasn't been easy, and there will be more challenges ahead. But remember this: you are resilient, you are capable of growth, and you are worthy of happiness. Keep moving forward, one step at a time, with love, yourself. As Ethan closed his journal, he felt a sense of peace. For the first time in years, he truly believed in himself and his ability to create a fulfilling life. Part 5. Facing the future with confidence. Ethan stood at the edge of a cliff overlooking the ocean, the wind brushing against his face. The magazine project had been a success, and he was on the cusp of new opportunities. Yet, he had come here for one final act of closure. This spot held a special significance for him. It was where he and Claire had spent one of their happiest days together. For a long time, he had avoided this place, associating it with the pain of their breakup. But today, he had come back with a different purpose. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper, the letter he had written to Claire but never sent. Thank you for being a part of my life, he whispered, holding the letter to his heart before releasing it to the wind. He watched as it fluttered away, a physical representation of his decision to let go. Ethan felt a wave of relief wash over him. He wasn't erasing the past, he was acknowledging it, learning from it, and moving forward, building new relationships. In the weeks that followed, Ethan found himself more open to new connections. His friendship with Mark deepened, and he began spending time with a small circle of supportive people he had met through his photography projects. One of them was Lena, a writer for the magazine he had worked with. She was sharp, creative, and had an infectious laugh that made Ethan feel at ease. They started collaborating on projects, and their shared passion for storytelling brought them closer. One evening, after wrapping up a brainstorming session, Lena looked at Ethan and said, "You know, you're not the same guy I met a few months ago. There's a lightness about you now." Ethan smiled. "I've been working on letting go of the things that weighed me down. It's been a process, but it's worth it." Lena nodded. "It shows. And for what it's worth, I think you're doing an incredible job." Their friendship blossomed, and while Ethan wasn't ready to jump into a new relationship just yet, he felt hopeful about the possibility of love in the future. A new chapter. One day, Ethan received an unexpected phone call. "Ethan, this is Sarah from Wanderlust magazine. We're putting together a feature on transformative journeys, and your story caught our attention. Would you be interested in sharing it through your photography?" Ethan's heart raced. Wanderlust was a prestigious publication, and this opportunity felt like a culmination of everything he had been working toward. "I'd be honored," he replied. The project required Ethan to travel across the country, capturing stories of people who had experienced profound transformations in their lives. It was challenging but deeply rewarding work. Through this journey, Ethan met people from all walks of life, each with their own struggles and triumphs. Their stories reminded him that pain and growth were universal, and that letting go was a powerful act of self-love. A visit to Mr. Henry's garden. Before leaving for his next assignment, Ethan paid a visit to Mr. Henry. The older man's garden was in full bloom, a vibrant testament to the seasons of life. "You're off to big things, aren't you, Mr. Henry said with a twinkle in his eye. "I am," Ethan replied, "and I couldn't have done it without your guidance." "Mr. Henry shook his head. "All I did was water the seed. You did the growing." They walked through the garden, the scent of flowers filling the air. "Ethan," Mr. Henry said, "remember this. Letting go isn't just about releasing the bad. It's also about making room for the good. Keep your heart open, and life will surprise you in the best ways." Ethan smiled. "I'll remember that." Reflecting on the journey, as Ethan packed his bags for his next assignment, he took a moment to reflect on how far he had come. He thought about the pain of his breakup, the disappointment of losing his job, and the darkness he had felt in those moments. But he also thought about the lessons he had learned, the people who had supported him, and the opportunities that had come his way since he chose to let go. Life wasn't perfect, and it never would be, but it was rich, meaningful, and full of possibilities. Ethan picked up his journal and wrote, "Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means freeing yourself to grow, to heal, and to embrace what's next. It's not easy, but it's worth it. And I'm ready for whatever comes next." As he closed his journal, Ethan felt a deep sense of peace. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face it with an open heart. And that, he realized, was the true power of letting go. Moral of the story: the power of letting go. Healing comes from acceptance. Letting go doesn't mean erasing the past. It means accepting what has happened, learning from it, and moving forward. Only by releasing pain and regret can we make space for new opportunities and growth. Growth requires courage. Change is uncomfortable, but it's necessary for personal growth. Taking small, brave steps toward letting go allows us to discover our true potential and move closer to fulfillment. The past shapes, but doesn't define you. While the past plays a role in shaping who we are, it doesn't determine our future. By letting go of what no longer serves us, we can rewrite our story. Support makes a difference. Seeking help from others, whether through mentors, friends, or loved ones, can provide the guidance and encouragement we need to move forward. Letting go is self-love, releasing pain, regret, and disappointment is an act of self-care. It frees us to focus on what truly matters and allows us to embrace happiness and possibility. Ultimately, the story reminds us that letting go is not about giving up. It's about creating space for a brighter, more fulfilling future. I'm so glad you spent this time with me. If you like the story, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more. Take care, and see you next time.